Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a time in every person's life when they must face the hardest truth. You cannot become who you're meant to be while clinging to who you used to be. If you want real change, deep transformation, and true freedom, you must have the courage to destroy the old version of yourself and rebuild from the ground up. I'm not talking about surface level changes. I'm not talking about switching jobs, hitting the gym for a few weeks, or pretending to be positive on social media. I'm talking about radical inner evolution, tearing down the limiting beliefs, toxic habits, and worn-out identities that no longer serve you. This is not a journey for the faint of heart. Lonely. It's painful. It's quiet. But it's essential. You must walk away from the noise of the crowd to hear the truth of your own voice. You must face the parts of yourself you've ignored, abandoned, and then you must release them. Destroy them if you must, because growth begins where your comfort zone ends. The old you is built on fear, shame, and survival. The new you will be built on self-respect, discipline, purpose. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for someone to rescue you. Don't wait for the perfect time. You are the architect, the demolition crew, and the builder of your own future. It's okay to outgrow your past, okay to outgrow people, and it's more than okay to rebuild alone. Because when you rebuild yourself alone, you discover who you truly are without the influence of others. From the ashes of your past, a stronger, wiser, and more powerful version of you will rise. So today, I challenge you, destroy the old you and rebuild yourself alone. Because the greatest project you will ever work on is yourself. Real transformation is not a makeover, a demolition and reconstruction. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that if we tweak a few behaviors, change our wardrobe, read a motivational quote, or set new goals, we've somehow evolved. Genuine transformation, lasting, life-altering change, goes far deeper than appearances or temporary adjustments. The outdated version of you is not just who you were last year. It's the collection of beliefs, habits, attitudes, and emotional reactions that have become your default over time, often without you realizing it. These patterns may have helped you survive in the past, but now they silently hold you back from the life you're capable of living. Show up in the way you talk to yourself, the relationships you accept, the fears you obey, and the dreams you silently bury. To transform, you have to identify these outdated pieces of yourself. And that's not easy. It requires uncomfortable introspection and brutal honesty. You must question your motivations. You must observe how you show up when no one is watching. You must be willing to admit that some of your current behaviors, though familiar or comforting, are tied to an older, more limited version of you that no longer fits the person you're trying to become. It's not about hating who you were. It's about outgrowing who you no longer need to be. And here's the hardest part: destruction must come before rebirth. You have to be willing to tear down the false identities you've clung to. Identities built on pleasing others, avoiding failure, or chasing validation. You may have to unlearn things you were taught as truths. You may have to walk away from environments that shaped you but now restrict you. It will feel uncomfortable. You will feel lost at times. But that's how you know you're doing it right. You're not applying a bandage. You're performing a deep surgery on your mindset, your self-concept, and your lifestyle. Superficial change is easy, but real transformation requires you to completely dismantle who you thought you were, so you can create space for who you truly are. Personal growth is one of the most rewarding journeys you'll ever embark on, but it's also one of the most misunderstood. People often imagine growth as a smooth, upward trajectory. You learn a few lessons, gain some confidence, and level up your life. But the truth is, real growth, the kind that changes your identity, your worldview, and your destiny, isn't glamorous. It's raw, unsettling, and often incredibly lonely. Why? Because growth demands separation. As you begin to evolve, you naturally create distance from the version of yourself that once felt safe. You start to outgrow your old routines, your old habits, and even the people who used to feel like home. Shift can be disorienting. It might feel like betrayal. It might feel like loss. And in many ways it is. You're letting go of the familiar to make space for the unknown. Loneliness isn't just about people. It's about identity. You may no longer relate to the things that once defined you. The conversations that once excited you might now feel empty. Places you once went to escape might feel confining. You begin to realize that the comfort you used to crave is now the very thing preventing your evolution. And when that happens, can feel like you're standing in the middle of a bridge, no longer who you were, but not yet who you're becoming. There's no manual for this part of the process. Friends might not understand. Family might question your choices. You may even find yourself doubting everything. But pain is often the proof that growth is happening. The ache of discomfort, the sting of solitude, the frustration of setbacks, all of it is shaping you, molding you, strengthening your character in ways that easy moments never could. Think of a caterpillar. Its transformation into a butterfly happens inside a cocoon, a dark, isolated place where it breaks down entirely before re-emerging with wings. Human growth is similar. Before you can rise, you have to fall into yourself. You have to confront your fears, face your shadows, and learn to sit with your thoughts in silence. And in that solitude, you begin to hear your real voice. Not the voice shaped by society, trends, or expectations, but your authentic, unfiltered self. This is the kind of growth that changes lives, not because it's easy, but because it's real. And though the road is often lonely, it's also sacred, because in that quiet, painful stretch between who you were and who you're becoming, you're forging something priceless, a self that is whole, resilient, and truly your own. You cannot build a new life with the same mindset that built your old one. Transformation doesn't begin with action. It begins with belief. The problem is, many of the beliefs we carry aren't even our own. They were passed down by parents, reinforced by society, shaped by painful experiences, and cemented by repetition. Over time, they become invisible walls, limits we mistake for facts. Limiting beliefs are the quiet lies we tell ourselves that sound like truth. I'm not good enough. I'll never succeed. This is just who I am. People like me don't get far. These thoughts become scripts running in the background of our lives, subtly directing our choices, lowering our expectations, keeping us trapped in cycles we don't even realize we're repeating. But here's the truth: what you believe shapes what you experience. If you believe you're incapable, you won't try. If you believe you're undeserving, you won't accept better. If you believe you'll always fail, you'll subconsciously sabotage your progress. Your life becomes a reflection of your internal dialogue. And if that dialogue is toxic or self-limiting, your reality will follow suit. Equally damaging are the toxic patterns we fall into, the habits, behaviors, and emotional reactions we cling to, even when we know they're harmful. Maybe it's staying in unhealthy relationships out of fear of being alone. Maybe it's procrastinating on your goals because deep down you fear success. Maybe it's numbing your emotions with distractions, addictions, or excuses instead of facing your pain head on. These patterns often feel familiar, even comforting, because they're tied to your identity. They've been your survival mechanisms. But survival and growth require different strategies. What once protected you may now be suffocating you. And if you're serious about becoming a new version of yourself, you have to break the agreements you've made with your limitations. This means doing the deep internal work. It means asking hard questions. Where did this belief come from? Who taught me this? Is it actually true? Does this thought support the person I want to become? Or does it keep me tied to who I was? It means observing your behaviors with honesty and courage and being willing to disrupt your autopilot. Letting go is rarely comfortable. You might feel guilt for changing. You might face resistance from others who benefited from the old version of you. But holding on to outdated beliefs and toxic patterns is like trying to climb a mountain with a bag of rocks. You won't get far, and eventually the weight will break you. Releasing what no longer serves you isn't about forgetting the past. It's about honoring it enough to grow beyond it. It's about choosing to stop surviving and start evolving. Only then can you create space in your mind, your heart, and your life for something new, something aligned with your purpose, your power, and your potential. One of the most powerful and often overlooked aspects of personal transformation is solitude. In a world that constantly demands connection, validation, and conformity, choosing to step away and rebuild yourself in isolation can feel unnatural or even selfish. But it is, in fact, one of the most courageous and clarifying decisions you can make. When you're constantly surrounded by people, friends, family, coworkers, society, you're constantly exposed to their expectations, opinions, and energy. Over time, it becomes difficult to tell the difference between who you truly are and who you've learned to be in order to fit in, accepted, or avoid rejection. We become actors in our own lives, performing roles that were assigned to us rather than chosen by us. Rebuilding alone gives you the space to strip all of that away. In that solitude that the noise begins to quiet. You no longer have to perform. You no longer have to pretend. You begin to ask questions that you've been too distracted to ask. What do I actually want? What do I value? What do I believe in? Not because I was told to, but because I've thought deeply about it. Who am I when no one is watching? This process can feel terrifying at first, because without external feedback, you may feel like you're floating without direction. But that's exactly the point. Growth isn't about finding a new mask to wear. It's about uncovering what's been buried beneath all the masks you've worn to survive. About reconnecting with your raw, unfiltered self. The version of you that existed before the world told you who to be. Aloneness also teaches you self-reliance. When you rebuild yourself without leaning on others to define you, validate you, or guide every step, you strengthen your internal compass. You stop seeking permission to evolve. You begin to trust your intuition. You develop confidence, not because someone else believes in you, but because you've learned to believe in yourself, even when no one is clapping for you. In solitude, you also learn to face your truth. There's no distraction, no one else to blame, and nowhere to hide. You have to sit with your regrets, your insecurities, your fears, and take full ownership of them. And though that process is uncomfortable, it's also liberating. Because once you faced your inner world without running, you gain something unshakable self-knowledge. Only when you understand who you are at your core, what drives you, what limits you, what inspires you, can you rebuild in a way that's sustainable and real. You're no longer designing a life based on trends, approval, or comparison. You're designing a life based on truth. Your truth. Rebuilding yourself alone is not about isolation for its own sake. It's about disconnection from illusion so you can reconnect with what is real. When you rise from that place, what you create is no longer a reaction to the world. It's a reflection of your soul. One of the hardest lessons to accept on the journey of personal growth is this: no one is coming to save you. Not your parents, not your partner, not your friends, not your mentors, and certainly not society. The responsibility to change, evolve, and rebuild your life falls entirely on your shoulders. That can feel heavy, but it's also deeply empowering once you understand the truth behind it. It's natural to look outward for answers. We grow up depending on others, seeking advice, guidance, validation, or permission to act. We hope that someone wiser, stronger, or more experienced will hand us the blueprint for a better life. But the reality is, even the best guidance means nothing if you're not willing to take action. No one can walk the path for you. No one else knows the full depth of your inner battles. No one else can hear the voice that speaks to you in your quietest moments, urging you to become more. Transformation begins the moment you stop outsourcing your power. Begins when you stop blaming your past, your circumstances, or other people for the state of your life. Yes, people may have hurt you. Yes, situations may have broken you. But healing and growth are not gifts others can give you. They are decisions you make for yourself every single day. Taking responsibility doesn't mean denying your pain. It means owning your response to it. It means saying, what happened to me is not my fault, but what I choose to do about it is my responsibility. It's about shifting from a mindset of victimhood to one of empowerment. That shift doesn't happen overnight. It's the foundation of every real transformation. The truth is, if you're waiting for someone to rescue you, you'll be waiting forever. People can support you, but they can't rebuild you. They can encourage you, they can't reprogram your mindset. They can love you, but they can't force you to love yourself. That work must come from within. The journey of becoming your best self is often uncomfortable because it forces you to look in the mirror and confront the choices you've made, the patterns you've repeated, and the excuses you've believed. Taking full ownership of your transformation is not about guilt. It's about freedom. When you take responsibility, you take back control. You realize that you are not powerless. You are not stuck. You are not waiting. You are choosing. And in that choice lies your greatest strength. Because if you build the life you currently have, even unconsciously, that means you also have the power to tear it down and build something new, consciously, intentionally, and deliberately. It won't be easy. But the process of choosing to change, to take full accountability, and to rebuild yourself from the inside out, on your terms, is one of the most powerful acts of self-respect you will ever perform. A stark difference between the person you once were and the person you are capable of becoming. And that difference is often measured by what drives you. Most of us, especially in earlier stages of life or during challenging periods, operate from a place of survival. We make decisions not out of clarity, confidence, or vision, but out of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of abandonment, fear of not being enough. The old self is built on these fears. It adapts to pain and rejection by becoming smaller, quieter, more agreeable, or more reactive. It becomes skilled at avoiding discomfort rather than pursuing growth, learns how to blend in, to appease others, to chase safety over authenticity. In many ways, this version of you may have served an important purpose at one point. It helped you cope, get through trauma, or survive difficult circumstances. But survival mode is not meant to be permanent. It's a temporary shelter, not a lifelong home. Living in survival mode narrows your vision. You're not focused on thriving. You're focused on not falling apart. And in that state, your potential becomes suffocated. You start to normalize anxiety. You settle for mediocrity. You believe that playing small is safer than standing in your power. Over time, you begin to identify with your wounds instead of your worth. You confuse familiarity with truth, and fear becomes the architect of your identity. But when you begin to consciously rebuild yourself, something shifts. You stop letting fear write your story. You begin to move from survival to intention, from reaction to creation. The new self is not born out of panic, it's born out of purpose. This new version of you is built with clarity, doesn't make decisions based on what's easiest or what avoids conflict. It makes decisions based on what aligns with your values, your goals, and your deeper sense of self. The new self is rooted in strength, not brute force, but the quiet, unshakable kind of strength that comes from knowing who you are and refusing to live beneath that truth. You stop doing things just to be accepted. You start doing things that express who you truly are. You stop clinging to the past because you're too busy creating your future. And in that shift, you begin to feel something you may not have felt in a long time: freedom. Because when you rebuild yourself on purpose, rather than fear, everything changes. Your confidence is no longer conditional. Your boundaries are no longer negotiable. Your energy is no longer scattered, trying to please everyone. You begin to attract different experiences, different people, and different outcomes because you're operating from a place of wholeness rather than lack. The transformation from the old self to the new self is not just about changing habits, about changing the emotional foundation of your life from fear-based existence to purpose-driven creation. And once you begin that shift, you'll realize just how much of your potential was waiting for you beneath the rubble of your past. In a society addicted to noise, distraction, and constant validation, choosing solitude can feel counterintuitive, almost rebellious. We're conditioned to think that being alone is synonymous with being lonely, that silence equals emptiness, and that time spent in isolation is wasted. But in truth, solitude is one of the most powerful environments for personal transformation because it forces you to confront the one person most responsible for your growth yourself. When you separate from the external world, its opinions, expectations, and chaos, you begin to hear what you've been drowning out: your thoughts, your truth, your unmet needs, and your unresolved emotions. It's in this quiet, reflective space that self-awareness is born. You begin to recognize your behavioral patterns not as fixed traits, but as learned habits. You become aware of the thoughts that drive your choices, the triggers that cause your emotional reactions, and the beliefs that have kept you trapped in self-imposed limits. But awareness is only the first step. What solitude also teaches you is discipline. Not the kind that's imposed from the outside, but the kind that comes from within. Without others to hold you accountable or push you forward, you're forced to develop internal structure. You start learning how to show up for yourself consistently, even when no one's watching. You begin to build habits that are not driven by external pressure, but by internal commitment. That's where true discipline lies, not in performance, but in quiet, deliberate practice. In solitude, no one to distract you from your pain. There's no crowd to validate your worth. There's no applause when you make a small breakthrough. But that's what makes the growth real. You learn to validate yourself, cheer yourself on in the dark, to become your own anchor when everything feels unstable. This is where emotional resilience is forged, not in ease, but in effort. Not in company, but in courage. Resilience isn't just about surviving hardship. It's about staying grounded in your values, your purpose, and your vision even when things get hard, especially when no one else is there to reassure you. Solitude gives you the opportunity to build that resilience in the most authentic way possible. You don't just react to life. You begin to respond with clarity and intention, because you've done the inner work to know yourself deeply. And in that process, solitude ceases to feel like loneliness. It becomes sacred. It becomes the workshop where your future self is being sculpted, slowly, quietly, and deliberately. Because every minute spent in solitude, when used intentionally, strengthens your mind, sharpens your emotional intelligence, and deepens your sense of identity. You begin to carry yourself differently. Not because others see you differently, but because you do. You trust yourself more. You understand your emotions instead of being ruled by them. You make decisions from a place of stillness, not desperation. That's the gift of solitude. It doesn't just isolate you from the world. It reconnects you with the parts of yourself you forgot you had. One of the most transformative lessons you learn while rebuilding yourself alone is the value of boundaries, not just as a tool for self-protection, but as a declaration of self-respect. When you're constantly surrounded by noise, opinions, and the needs of others, it becomes dangerously easy to lose sight of your own emotional landscape. You find yourself saying yes when you mean no, tolerating what makes you uncomfortable, and giving pieces of yourself away just to keep the peace, without realizing that you're sacrificing your own peace in the process. But solitude changes that. When you spend time alone, you become deeply aware of your own energy. You start to feel the difference between what drains you and what fuels you, between environments that nurture you and those that slowly suffocate your spirit. You realize that not every interaction deserves your time. Not every request requires your attention, and not every relationship is meant to continue. In silence, you finally hear your intuition speaking, clearly, firmly, without apology. Rebuilding alone sharpens that awareness. You're not distracted by external validation or guilt-based obligations. You learn how to create emotional and mental space, not out of bitterness or resentment, but from a place of clarity. You begin to understand that boundaries are not walls, they are filters. They don't shut people out. They protect what's sacred within you. They allow love in, but not manipulation. They allow connection, but not codependency. They make room for others, but not at the cost of your own well-being. This doesn't happen overnight. For many, setting boundaries can feel selfish or harsh, especially if you've been conditioned to people please or prioritize others' comfort over your own needs. But as you rebuild yourself in solitude, you begin to deconstruct that mindset. You realize that protecting your peace is not a luxury, it's a necessity. You cannot grow in chaos. You cannot heal in environments that constantly trigger your pain. You cannot evolve while clinging to connections that only value the outdated version of who you used to be. Boundaries are the scaffolding of your transformation. They create structure around your new self, allowing you to stand strong in your values and prioritize your inner alignment. They free you from the emotional exhaustion of overextending and the quiet resentment that builds when your needs are consistently ignored or dismissed. And most importantly, they give you space to breathe, reflect, and choose rather than react. Over time, setting boundaries becomes less about others and more about you. You begin to hold space for yourself, your dreams, your energy, and your peace with a level of seriousness that doesn't waver. You no longer chase after acceptance or shrink to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. Instead, you stand tall, calm, and grounded, fully aware of your worth and unwilling to compromise it just to keep others comfortable. Pain is often viewed as something to avoid, suppress, or escape. We're taught to numb it with distractions, deny it with fake positivity, or drown it in busyness. But the truth is, pain is not your enemy. It's your guide. When you stop running from it and begin to sit with it, listen to it, and learn from it, pain becomes one of the most honest, revealing, transformative teachers you will ever have. Rebuilding yourself requires that you confront the pain whether it's the ache of past failures, the wounds of betrayal, the disappointment of broken dreams, shame of mistakes you've made. It forces you to revisit the places inside you that still hurt, that you've tried so hard to forget, and that can feel terrifying. But the pain you avoid doesn't go away. It waits. It festers, seeps into your behaviors. It sabotages your growth in quiet, unconscious ways. Avoided pain turns into emotional baggage. Faced pain turns into wisdom. When you allow yourself to feel the full weight of what you've been carrying, you begin to release it. Not all at once, not perfectly, but gradually. You cry, you rage, you forgive, you come face to face with truths you've been afraid to acknowledge. And instead of breaking you, they begin to free you. Because healing doesn't begin with forgetting. Healing begins with feeling. Pain teaches you where your boundaries were crossed, where your trust was misplaced, where your self-worth was compromised. Shows you the moments where you abandoned yourself to please others, and the times you settled for less because you didn't believe you deserved more. These realizations are not comfortable, but they are necessary, because in those moments of emotional exposure, you gain clarity. You stop pretending. You stop performing. You begin to reclaim your power from every place and every person that once took it from you. And with that power comes resilience, the kind of resilience that isn't hardened or bitter, but soft, deep, and unshakable. You begin to understand that your pain didn't come to punish you. It came to awaken you, came to break down the parts of you that were never truly yours to begin with, so something stronger, truer, and more aligned could rise in its place. Pain also teaches compassion. When you've truly faced your own suffering, you gain a deeper understanding of others. You stop judging so quickly because you recognize the silent battles people hide. You stop needing to be perfect because you've embraced your own humanity. And that compassion, both for yourself and for others, becomes one of the greatest tools in your transformation. It grounds you. It softens your heart without weakening your spirit. Ultimately, pain reveals who you are when there's nothing left to hide behind. It strips away the masks, the distractions, and the false identities you've clung to for safety. And what's left is raw, honest, and real. That is the version of you worth rebuilding, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. Because when pain is no longer feared or avoided, it becomes a path. A path to understanding, to growth, to strength. A path that leads directly through the fire and into the person you were always meant to become. One of the most profound outcomes of choosing To destroy the old you and rebuild yourself alone is the emergence of a confidence that is truly your own. Unlike the fleeting confidence that depends on praise from others, achievements, or external approval, this kind of confidence is deep, rooted, stable, and unshakable. It is forged in solitude through the trials and victories you experience on your own terms, without anyone else cheering you on or validating your worth. When you rely on external validation, your sense of self becomes fragile, vulnerable to criticism, comparison, and rejection. Your mood rises and falls with the opinions of others. You might feel powerful one day because of a compliment or success, only to feel diminished the next because of judgment or neglect. Roller coaster leaves you exhausted and uncertain, always searching for approval outside yourself and never fully trusting your own value. But rebuilding yourself alone changes everything about that dynamic. When you are willing to face your fears, confront your weaknesses, and work on your growth without an audience, you develop a profound sense of self-trust. You learn that your worth isn't contingent on applause or acceptance. It exists simply because you exist. This confidence is quiet but powerful. It's a calm knowing rather than loud boasting. The process requires you to step outside the familiar safety net of external approval. You have to be willing to stand in your truth when no one else believes in you, when no one sees your effort, and when the world seems indifferent, is where true courage is born. And with courage comes a different kind of confidence, one that does not depend on circumstance or people. This internal confidence allows you to take risks you might never have dared before. You begin to make decisions that honor your values, even if they are unpopular or misunderstood. You stop chasing perfection because you no longer fear failure as deeply. You become comfortable with your imperfections because you recognize they don't diminish your value. They make you human. Moreover, self-earned confidence creates a magnetic energy that others naturally respect and gravitate toward. But unlike previous times, it's not about impressing or pleasing others. It's about living authentically and fully. Your presence becomes a reflection of your integrity, resilience, and self-awareness. Over time, this confidence anchors you through life's inevitable challenges. You become less reactive to criticism and setbacks because you know who you are beneath it all. You develop a grounded sense of peace because your worth is no longer at the mercy of external forces. In essence, the journey of rebuilding yourself alone isn't just about change. It's about becoming your own strongest supporter. It's about cultivating a relationship with yourself that is based on unconditional acceptance and belief. Foundation of self-confidence becomes the bedrock for all future growth, happiness, and fulfillment. In the end, destroying the old you and rebuilding yourself alone is the greatest act of courage and self-love you can offer yourself. A journey filled with challenges, doubts, and moments of solitude, but it is also a journey toward freedom, authenticity, and true empowerment. Remember, no one else can walk this path for you, but every step you take alone brings you closer to the person you were always meant to be. So embrace the process. Embrace the discomfort. Embrace the strength that comes from standing tall on your own 2 feet. Because when you rebuild yourself from the ground up, without leaning on anyone else, you create a foundation so solid that nothing external can shake it. You are not defined by your past, your fears, or the limitations others have placed on you. You are defined by the power you hold within, the power to rise, to rebuild, and to become the masterpiece only you can create. Step forward with courage, own your transformation, and know this: the new you is waiting on the other side of that brave decision to begin again alone, and that new you is unstoppable.